I know this has been difficult for the ranking members. It has been for me.
This is a good deal for the taxpayer.
When the process is broken, the product is flawed.
There are false promises with Bear Stearns and AIG and GSEs.
We have a bill in front of us that is a bipartisan bill.
Many Democrats don't like it.
The lower income people, the poor people, they will get nothing.
Many Republicans are choking on it.
Madam Speaker, I rise not as a representative of Wall Street, New York, but of 65th Street in Woodside, Queens, New York.
We started here a week ago with the Paulson plan. It was simple. Give them the keys to the Treasury and suspend all the laws.
The administration has come with a proposal that to me reminds me of roulette. And they're challenging us to just take the bullets.
Madam Speaker, fundamentally there's something wrong with the way we are proceeding. The arguments use fear to build confidence. We're on an artificial deadline, rushing to judgment, and fearful we can't get there in time.
Like the Iraq War and the Patriot Act, this bill is fueled by fear and hinges on haste. So much is missing. There is no requirement that Wall Street pay a dime for the damage caused or the cleanup.
Unfortunately, this bill is not going to solve the problem. This bill is going to bail out foreign banks. It's going to bail out Wall Street, but it's not going to bail out banks. And it's going to hurt the taxpayer.
They made an investment. They took a risk. It didn't turn out well.
We heard the same argument with Fannie Mae bailout and Freddie Mac. We've heard it in the discussion about Bear Stearns and AIG. It's the same old story.
Why? Because of fear.
What has infected Wall Street may soon reach Main Street.
The Bush administration says we are facing the worst financial crisis in modern history. That is not true. The market problems of the 1980s were much worse than today. Then over 3,000 banks failed. Interest rates were at 21%. All the banks in Texas went down. The economic instability was resolved in the financial system in a much more disciplined and rigorous way than taxpayers printing money for Wall Street.
Bailout of $700 billion without adequate hearing, without adequate testimony.
$700 billion is a lot of money.
We're talking about a $700 billion bailout. It happens to be the same amount of money, $700 billion, of what we send every year for foreign oil.
$1 trillion is probably what it'll be and more. We not yet know how much it'll be. We need to take our time on this. We've been talking about it now 7 days nonstop. We can do better. There is a better process.
400 economists, 3 Nobel laureates.
Over 400 economists, has been said earlier, and we've had the documentations, are opposed to the process and the way that we're going about it.
The largest corporate bailout in American history forever changes the relationship between government and the financial sector and passes the cost along to the American people, and I cannot support it.
Madam Speaker, the Constitution of the United States is present to protect Main Street.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this bill. This is only going to make the problem that much worse. The problem came about because we spent too much, we borrowed too much, and we printed too much money, we inflated too much, and we overregulated. And this is all that this bill is about, is more of the same. So you can't solve the problem.
We have individuals who were drunk. The regulators were the bartenders who continued to pour the drink, didn't stop him from drinking. And now he was drunk, he got on the main thoroughfare and had an accident. The accident clouds the highway.
We're looking at a symptom.
It's the highway where we have our pension funds.
And we're looking at the collapsing of a market that was unstable. It was unstable because of the way it came about.
It's the highway where we have our car loan and our mortgages.
It came about because of a monopoly control of money and credit by the Federal Reserve System, and that is a natural consequence of what happens when a Federal Reserve System creates too much credit.
I hate that near criminal mismanagement of our economy and near criminal contempt for our values has forced us to act today. Today's financial crisis could lead to an economic meltdown unseen since the Great Depression.
As a former member of the House Financial Services Committee for 8 years, I can tell you that the situation that we find ourselves in today is the direct result of the deregulation-happy, turn a blind eye of this administration and its allies in Congress.
By definition, today we are picking winners and losers in assets.
I want to point out that this legislation is giving us the choice between bankrupting our children or bankrupting a few of these big financial institutions on Wall Street that made bad decisions.
Think about those retired people whose retirement income will shrivel up to zero. Think about the jobs that'll be lost. If I didn't think we were on the brink of an economic disaster, it would be the easiest thing in the world for me to say no to this. But I believe the risk in not acting is much higher than the risk in acting.
And he told us that there was a crisis and that he had a solution. He gave us the horns of a dilemma, two sharp, shiny points that we could impale ourselves on. One, that the financial system was going to collapse and implode and the sky was going to fall. Certainly we wouldn't want to choose that. Or the other, we could write a $700 billion blank check.
Who is it that's going to manage these assets? I've been asking. And finally, the answer I got was, well, of course, we're going to have to outsource that. You're going to outsource it to the very people that caused the problem. We're going to give them billions for assets they've mismanaged, and then we're going to hire them to manage those assets, please.
No, the stakes are too high to turn back to those who have brought us the problem in the first place. Now, we know that this bill will allow million-dollar-a-month salaries to executives at bailed-out firms, and it allows hundreds of billions of dollars to be used to buy the toxic assets currently held by foreign investors.
Capitalism is too important to be left to capitalists alone.
The crisis we now face is a result of government intervention in the market. We are in this predicament largely because implicit and eventually explicit federal guarantees in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac shielded the financial services sector from market discipline. Mr. Speaker, those who believe that they can control and direct the market's invisible hand will eventually be slapped by it. That's the painful and embarrassing situation we find ourselves in today.
Taxpayers are rightfully outraged at the prospect of bailing out irresponsible banks and those that lead them.
This Congress has to do its job. None of us came here to have to vote for this mud sandwich. I could describe it a lot of different ways. You all know how awful it is.
This is a question of jobs. It is a question about whether people in our districts are going to have jobs supplied by small businesses, medium-sized businesses. Can they go to the banks to get the credit so they can put out the payroll?
Today we are in a global financial bank panic. It is the first of our global economy. We are seeing a leveraged bailout of the United States Treasury.
And that was on that day that we learned of a $700 billion request. But it wasn't just the money that was alarming. It was the nature of the legislation. It gave the Secretary of the Treasury czar-like powers, unlimited powers.
This morning's Wall Street Journal describes how the credit crisis is now descending onto franchises, the McDonald's, the Paneras, the Dunkin' Donuts, and threatening the jobs of thousands of their employees. So my vote in favor of this legislation will in fact be a vote to protect the interests of hardworking Americans.
It's a difficult vote for all of us. Either we're promoting unprecedented federal interference in the marketplace, or we're bailing out Wall Street millionaires and rewarding bad business decisions.
I will be voting no on this measure.
Actually, this bill is the wrong medicine. It concentrates financial power even more in the hands of Wall Street's mega banks and its buddies at the U.S. Treasury. It bails out their bad behavior with no reform to prevent further abuse, and it ignores Main Street's real housing challenges.
When the markets go down, Main Street gets cleaned out.
These are the votes that separate the men from the boys and the girls from the women. These are the votes. These are the votes that your constituents sent you here to decide on their behalf. They didn't tell you it was going to be easy. They didn't tell you that, it's going to be black and white. You won't have any shades of gray.
Just because your constituents hate this bill and will hate it more when they learn the details does not mean that voting for it is an act of courageous patriotism. Just because this bill is unpopular doesn't mean we have to pass it immediately.